There's this glorification of being an entrepreneur. Everything's going to happen. Like you're going to have freedom and you can work whenever you want and you can take off whenever you want and everything's going to go your way because you're doing it yourself. And the secret is to understand that there are many failures every single day, and an entrepreneur's job is to keep getting up and to realize that every time something doesn't work out, you're just one step closer to figuring it out, whatever that is, and take that data, learn, grow, and pivot.
So what's interesting in getting ready for this discussion today, I've also started 8 companies from scratch. I'm invested in a number of businesses. It's all my personal fund. I've never raised $1 for any of my companies. I've had one 9-figure exit, one 7, one 8-figure, all cash. All my new stuff, I do that. And in that journey, I'm exposed to a lot of folks in the startup, early stage, mid, medium, large, company. Rarely do the husband and wife teams work out. Like it's tough to make it work. So I'm really curious, like where did you two meet? And how did you decide to start doing this, going on this journey to build businesses?
So Mike and I met, I should say this, I have always known his older brother, Andrew. And so Andrew and I were really good friends in high school, and Andrew married my best friend from high school. And I actually was kind of raised in Mike's house, because we would go over there. It was the house to hang out. It was the house that had all the food, and it just was very welcoming. And so I always knew of Mike, but I knew of him as the annoying little brother who was playing the drums downstairs and wouldn't get out of the basement. So that was always like my first impression of him. And as the years went on, then I saw sides of him, as well as all of our friends, that, he's really smart and he knows about this thing called the internet and things like that. And we'd, cross with friend groups at weddings and things like that. And it wasn't until 1996 when we were at a mutual friend's wedding that we spent a ton of time together. And then I was like, oh no, I think I really like my best friend's little brother. And we just hit it off, and we've been married ever since 1999. And I think it was kind of a natural process. We both were in different jobs doing our own things, but we would always come back home for dinners, and we lived together and would ask each other for advice in our very specific areas of expertise. So Mike was really great at vision, business model, sales, and networking. And I was really good at the execution side, the ops side. And it was just natural. And I think we were very, very lucky, because that just kind of kept going from there. We never really had any overlapping skills.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about selecting the right partner. So when people start a business, that is so important. It is like you're getting married even when you're not. And so both of you had that. You would put in the time, you would, whatever it took, you would divide and conquer and go for it. Was your goal always, so in my companies that I've started, it's never been a thought to build something and sell it. I mean, I always know at some point I probably will, but it was never a thought. Was your thought, hey, let's build a bunch of stuff and have exits and go that direction? Like what was your mindset around that?
I don't think we ever started any of the businesses with an exit in mind or necessarily money. I started my first company at Northwestern University. I was a journalism major. Journalism, was one of the first industries really hit by, what we called Web 1.0, just the commercial internet, right? It was about commerce and about information, free flow of information everywhere on the planet. And I just went down a rabbit hole. And at the time, there were only 13 million people on the internet. So starting an internet company in 1994, you didn't do it for the money. You actually really hated money if you did it, because there are only 13 million people using it. Those of us who started businesses, and some of us are still around, like you look at Mark Cuban with broadcast.com and some others who are, let's just say, old like us. We were just interested in what this technology would mean for humanity first, because it all started with just kind of like communication between people, but ultimately for business, for commerce, for democracy, for however you wanted to, approach it. And then we got into social media. So we sold that company, golf.com, web.com, which Kass and I started together, Web 1.0, for 25 million. And then we got into social media when social media was young. And we were just interested. We had no idea. We were an early investor in Facebook because we worked with Facebook. But if you would have told me that it was $1 trillion company, it would have been like, whatever, right? Like, no chance. We were just interested in this virtual representation of real life relationships, which is what Facebook, ultimately captured, right? What they call the social graph. And that's been our career of being early, but not too early, building businesses that have, at least some characteristics that are interesting to investors, whether it was, media or golf.com or software as a service or, e-commerce. And we're not business school people. We're very unit economics people. And when you put your head down in a good market, you can build a business that others are interested in. So, we've sold a bunch of them. Some of our companies that we've invested in have gone public. Some have gone out of business. So we've seen everything. But for our businesses, we started them because we couldn't not start them. We felt so compelled to do them.
Yeah, the first one that I started, it took me a half a second to go, why didn't I do this before? And I've never looked back. Some people, it's great working with people, doesn't matter where we're at, but I really enjoy running something, building something way more than just working in something for somebody else. So it sounds like you're both kind of in the same boat.
Definitely.
What at a high level for our listeners, can you describe the Buddy Media journey? Obviously it would take us 5 days to walk through all of it, but just kind of at a high level, pivots, raising money, all the way to exiting and what that felt like, going through the exit.
Yeah. So Kass was giving birth to our third child, Vivian, who now herself, she's in college, which is kind of crazy. And I was waiting, and I'm on my BlackBerry, and Facebook launches their platform. Mark Zuckerberg gets up on stage and he says, I'm inviting all developers to build applications that use the social graph, and let's make the web social. So instead of playing solitaire, which is what we all did, or Brick Breaker on our BlackBerry, you now could play poker with friends and Scrabble and all these games. And, the world was now social. And so that hit me very hard. Kass gets brought back into the room after giving birth. And she wakes up. I said, I got it. I got the next business. And I just went down this rabbit hole. First, she said, you're the worst person ever, I think, in her mind. That I've just had a third baby through basically a surgery. And so, but she came to the conclusion that it was going to be big. It was a number 4 social net at the time, Facebook. We couldn't have guessed how big it was going to be, and it was a time that people were excited about Facebook. Facebook hadn't ruined democracy yet. It hadn't ruined mental health. It was a time when the idea that we can connect humanity on one platform was good for the world, right? If globalism fails, we're all doomed. We're all in it together, right? And so it hasn't played out from a cultural, social, political standpoint the way we had hoped. And we've, thought about that a lot. But there's no doubt we picked the right space for this next phase of the internet. We built it, hundreds of employees. In 5 years, we got to a little over 50 million of annual recurring revenue. The product was offering to very large brands, 9 out of the top 10 global advertisers, P&G, Unilever, Ford, Microsoft, giving them a system to let them control all of their social media communications and marketing, paid, owned, and earned marketing. You could publish content, you could buy ads, you could listen to what your customers are saying. And we built it in partnership with Facebook. They would come onto the Buddy Media platform. They would get all set up globally, and then they would spend money on ads to amplify their messaging. And it was a whirlwind of a, company. We're one of the fastest growing software companies of all time. We did some research and hadn't seen any other company get to 50 million in annual recurring revenue. within 3 years of launching their initial product. And we had several offers for the business. I really love Mark Benioff. I love Salesforce. He offered a lot of money. He offered over $800 million. We also had an offer from Google, which I haven't really talked about, for more than $100 million more. But we thought that we were aligned. You talk about spiritually and personally, and from a business standpoint, Mark's 111 model, his integrated philanthropic model, his support of the University of California Children's Hospital systems. This is how we built our business, on the back of philanthropy. And so we looked at Google's "don't do evil" as, like, if you have to say that not to do evil, you're probably doing evil. And we didn't see the alignment, and we were willing with our investors to take, a lower deal for a bunch of business reasons, but also because, we really thought that our team and ourselves would be better positioned within the Salesforce organization.
Yeah, that's great. And finding the right fit with a buyer is super important. It took me 23 years to go from zero, almost going out of business 15 times the first year, to build an aerospace company to 100 million in sales, over 500 team members. Never interested in selling, but the right strategic buyer knocked 3 times and I said no. And even when I sold it, I stayed 17 months for the transition, took millions off the top as retention bonuses for the key people that would be left, made 13 multimillionaires. 2 guys I started with, I couldn't afford to pay them the first year, so gave them, provisional equity. One got a check for over 30 million when we sold for his small, sliver. The other guy had about $20 million. All of that was so important to me because they actually got us there. And yet when it came time to sell and now all the money's on the table, the behavior was very telling. Like, some of the leaders were all in, this makes sense. Others would complain, why are you taking millions off the top? It's coming out of our piece. We made commitments to employees. We made commitments to our customers. You cross the line when you do a deal where any additional investment comes out of your side of it, but we made this commitment to the customers, wouldn't have gotten here without them. So it sounds like you have a very similar philosophy. When we want everybody to win going through, that's not the majority of people when money's at stake. Talk a little bit about that and how you think about it. For me, it's everything.
I'm right with you, Lee. I only wanted to do companies where all of the alignment was there, and that meant that everybody gets a slice of the pie. And I didn't care if you were young, had no experience. I just didn't care. I was adamant that we were giving away a slice of the pie, and that when we won, everyone wins. And we've had the same thing happen where, boards and investors just didn't understand that. And every time there were grants, well, this seems like a lot. This seems, well, like, we can't do this without these people, and they deserve to win when we win. So I couldn't agree more. It's not, I have learned, like you, it is not the norm. And it's a shame, because I think it really is the first foundation of culture.
Yeah, and I always feel like if we're paying everybody, and it's hard to get it perfect, but fairly relative to each other based on the value they're creating for the organization, I always ran at it. I mean, some folks got equity, but they had to work in the business that they left. They had to sell it back. I always set it up that way. But everybody else, I went down the road of, hey, we're going to take about 20% of our total net profit and pay it out monthly, proportionate to your base wage. And so now, whether you're making $12 an hour or $300,000 a year, everybody gets, let's say, 10% or 20% or whatever that happens to be. We'd pay a little bit, like 25% monthly, 75% hold for end of year accumulation. Kept them in the game all year long. There was something regularly happening. That seemed like a really good approach. And even with well over 500 team members, everybody was winning every single month. If you didn't win, you kind of go back to, okay, the drawing board. Now, what can we do to win? And they could see barometers in the facility on all of our big screens going up as a percentage of PC, their performance comp program. I like that approach, and that seemed less messy and complicated than the equity approach. Have you played with both sides of that? Just bonuses based on profit, equity? What have you learned there?
Yeah. So we come out of, we spent all of our career in venture, right? Up till now. So building venture backed companies and investing in venture companies, everything from chip companies that are creating the next generation of NVIDIA, like we have that today, game companies, space companies. And it's hard to hire A-level talent in the venture world without an equity program, without incentive options. Because it's just ingrained. It's ingrained in the venture mentality. The movies, the stories of, multimillionaires who work for these high flying companies. We also own great businesses. So not venture, but an executive search company. And we're active in the healthcare space, and we're buying more. And one of the first things we did at the executive search company was a profit sharing program that, if you look at it, it's basically, if you give us loyalty, we'll give you more money, but it let us share the profits in a way that aligned all of us. So the better we do, the better they do. It was optional. It had a matching program where we match contributions that you make to a long-term vesting program. So we love using financial incentives to keep everyone aligned. So if you want to get everyone on the same page, make sure that everyone's goals are tied together, right? And you're not all paddling in different directions. And so, whether it's equity, whether it's profit sharing, whether it's phantom equity, where if we sell, you get this. I don't think it really matters. What matters is that you're putting your actions, the behavior, the programs, the systems behind the values that you lead with.
Do you find that the majority of companies align incentives that way, or is it a minority? What are your thoughts?
I haven't found that. I think what you're saying and what we're saying is more the exception and not the rule. And it surprises me because it's such an easy lever to pull. And with such a kind of bang for your buck, literally, right? I just don't get it. I don't get why the founders are so worried about this part of it.
Yeah, if they understood, they would do it. It's almost like not knowing the value of $1 million bill sitting on the floor. They just won't pick it up. They'll walk right by it.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's ignorance, right? They just don't get it.
Yeah, 100%. One of the partners in my consulting and investing business, ETW, or Execute to Win, was Jack Welch before he passed. And I always loved the way he said, and I've lived this for decades, even before I met him, where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what's in it for all of you to go on this journey with us? Sounds so simple, but so few do it. And it really is ignorance. They don't see the value in doing it. Why would we give this away when we don't have to? Oh my gosh, like the best investment we can make is in our team.
And most people just don't think about it. Like, there are 5 million businesses started last year. Most of them are, they're restaurants or laundromats. They're kind of businesses that look around your community. And the last thing a lot of founders think about is, how do you incent the team? Those same founders who don't think about it come to us. We had a dinner last night with Gary Vaynerchuk and say, like, my people are leaving. How, do I create loyalty? Well, no matter how self-aware you are, how empathetic, how great of a leader, if the systems aren't there to make people feel like an owner, it's not going to happen. Now, we always offered equity, but we wouldn't give a lot of equity if people didn't value it. Some people wanted more cash, right? I have kids. I have a mortgage. Like, I can't compromise on that. So I want most of my comp in cash. Others, typically younger, less kind of expenses, went all in on equity. And the best drug ever is not selling a company. It's seeing someone who started with you at 22 years old become a millionaire because she took equity instead of, $80,000 salary, right? And so we had that a bunch of times that just make you feel great, right? Like they change their own life because these are people who help grow the business, right? But as a leader, we gave them an opportunity to do life-changing work, which is exciting.
Yeah, we create the environment from which they create value. So we did our job. They leaned in and actually did it, no question. So here's an interesting, for me, it's a gigantic distinction, but I don't see that experience a lot of CEOs get it. So many would say, hey, we want to improve engagement. How do we make people feel this way or do this or do that? And they're looking for easy fixes, this magic pill or whatever it is. And for me, the other side of it, the right side of it is you need to be a certain way, like embrace being this way. I can't control how people feel, but I can create an environment where the right people will have really high level productive engagement and creating value and want to be part of the team, run through walls. I could always tell we were doing it right when the harder it got, the harder we laughed going through. And Cass, I've heard interviews talk similarly about that. But there's a big distinction between, give me the magic pill and I want to really be this way because it's the right way to go. So does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think you're saying like there's no shortcuts to actually being a leader and leading by example, right? So lots of founders come to us and say, well, how do I do this? How do I do this? Like there's got to be an easier way. They always say that to me. There's got to be an easier way to get everybody to align and do what we need them to do. And when I kind of, peel the layers of the onion off, I'm like, well, you're not talking the talk, right? And you're not walking the walk. You are literally sitting there asking for a shortcut on how to have people want to work for you and run through those walls. There is no shortcut. You have to put in the time. You have to believe in the values and the mission. And that has to match your actions, not just your words.
Yeah, 100%. And so reading the book, getting ready for this, and I recommend all the listeners read Shoveling Shit, amazing book. And on Amazon, I think we're close to 100,000 business books, thousands coming in every single month. It's crazy what's out there. There's a huge sea of this stuff. And like we were talking about before we started recording, I love that there's so much diversity because people hear things differently. But the thing I want to get into here and get both of your perspectives on this is, as a leader, as you're navigating this, and the thing I love about your book is you have really practical things that they can use and keep them very focused. A lot of folks, what works for both of you, what worked for Jack Welch, would work for any other leader you pick, just do these things and it doesn't work for the majority. Well, why doesn't it work? And I think I know there's so many forces against you. Ignorance is against you. They don't understand the plan. They're not aligned, whatever it is. You have hidden agendas. You have lack of capability. You have malicious compliance. You've got all this stuff going on, politics, the bigger an organization gets, et cetera. And I kind of come back to, well, what are the leadership traits and how you're going to consistently show up? But also, what's the number one job of a CEO? I think it's to continually increase the value of their business. And then at every point in time, and Mike, I've heard you mention this in some of the interviews, what are the top 1, 2, 3 initiatives that the entire company needs to be appropriately supporting? So I guess where I'm going with this giant question is, we can give everybody an 8-step process, but it doesn't work for the majority. And it's how you navigate, and Shoveling Shit has a lot of really great ways to navigate and stay focused. Am I making sense where I'm going with this?
Yeah. And it's been a harder journey for me. Some leaders are born. I think Kass was born a leader, two sport athlete, leader in her classes, leader at schools, leader at companies, youngest kid, knows how to show up. I got crossed eyes, a bad heart. I'm all over the place sometimes. And it got me in trouble as a leader. I wasn't listening. I was putting my needs ahead. And I was leading companies at 20 years old, right? So I'm like really young. And so what I've come to the conclusion, and, Kass can give you the real lowdown, is, if you're leading with ego, if you are not checking your arrogance, we all have it, right? Like entrepreneurs saying, I'm going to go from this doesn't exist to I'm going to make it exist and I'm going to raise the money and I'm going to sell it. Like we're a little crazy, right? Like I admit that. If your fear lead, if you let the politics take over, and if you're not able to work on yourself first and foremost, you'll never be able to lead an organization. And so one of the most important things, the gifts that Kass ever gave to me was a 360 review from a woman named Tammy Jersey, who not early, but it was early enough that she showed me how I was getting in the way, how people around me I was working with, I was not helping them reach their potential. I was cutting them off. I was imposing my views. And so leadership starts with you. Do your work. Ask what you could do better. Anyone who's married knows kind of their limitations. Not all CEOs know their limitations, right? And your charisma is great, but people want to feel listened to and heard, right? So you have to kind of show up the way your people need. And so ultimately, for us, it came down to how we put that into action. Focus. So we were a benevolent dictatorship. We weren't a democracy. We listened. We wanted to keep everyone's interests in mind, but like it was our responsibility to grow shareholder value, right? We could see everything as the founders. And your job is to focus the organization, make sure everyone understands what you need to do to reach this goal, reach the vision, and provide the resources to make it happen. You can't ask people to do crazy things without having the budget and the resources to do those crazy things. And that's really what it's come down to is like focus an organization. Does everyone know what we're trying to do? And do we have the resources to get there?
Well, and stay focused on what we're trying to do, increase the value of the business. And these are the things that are the biggest, I guess, obstacles or challenges to be solved right now.
And Lee, like you asked, why is it, or you mentioned, why is it that you can have 100,000 business books that pretty much, for the most part are giving you recipes for success and people are not following it. And I would say it's part of what Mike said, which is lack of self-awareness about someone and then fear getting in the way and fear paralyzing that person so that they can't get out of their own way. Right. And that's when you have your ego, and it kind of takes over your gut. It takes over your decision making. And the best entrepreneurs out there know how to navigate fear. It's not about getting rid of it. It's about pushing through it.
In most business books, and I read a lot, I'm somewhere north of probably 80 to 100 books a year that I read. They're just nugget dumps. So a few of them will give you a recipe, but most are nugget dumps, and it's up to us to connect all the dots going through. But this concept of fear, shoveling shit, when I look at the metaphors, like it's always going to be like this. I've learned to completely change my relationship with struggle. I really value it. And even unhealthy struggle, there's so much we can learn. Like I've had a number of things where, infection, almost lost my leg. I mean, the worst pain ever. Like a lot of things like that we all have as we go through life. There's so much to learn going through that we can create value in the future. But that's the metaphor for your book. People are looking, if it's not easy, if you're not happy all the time, something must be wrong. I don't even get the happiness piece. You're not happy with what can I do? For me, the internal most important number is fulfillment. And every year, purpose, more and more fulfilled, all of that. It's impossible, I think, to be happy all the time. But there's gurus that'll take our money for doing it. So talk about this relationship with struggle, shoveling shit, all of it. I've never once had it be perfect across the board. It's always multiple climates throughout the company.
100%. I think that there's this glorification of, like you said, that being an entrepreneur, everything's going to happen. Like you're going to have freedom and you can work whenever you want and you can take off whenever you want and everything's going to go your way because you're doing it yourself. And the secret is to understand that there is freedom, and that is something that's amazing in choice, that you get to show up every day and you're going to be punched in the face pretty much 50 times a day. There are many failures every single day, and an entrepreneur's job is to keep getting up and to realize that every time something doesn't work out, you're just one step closer to figuring it out, whatever that is, and take that data, learn, grow, and pivot, right? And move from it. And I think that this ideal, like you said, that you're supposed to be happy, you're supposed to be whatever, it's not about happiness, it's about fulfillment. It's about purpose. And we will say it over and over again, being an entrepreneur is really, really hard. It is not for the faint of heart. And there's nothing we'd rather do because it does get us up in the morning. It does drive us to learn, to grow. And the greatest entrepreneurs in the world are not afraid to fail. They actually look at it as getting one step further in their whole process to figuring out what they want to do.
I don't think anybody can grow without struggle, some effort, physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever that is. If it was true, the less I went to the gym, the stronger and more flexible I would be. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So we have to develop and go that way. Mike, you were talking earlier about, CEOs, how you show up, you can develop, in perspective. That's what I'm getting out of it. You mentioned something in one of the interviews I listened to about founders can sometimes, without even knowing it, transition into the role of destroyer. Talk about that, because I think that's a really big deal.
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that to me because that was my role in many cases. And what I had to learn myself, because, for example, I love engineers. I love builders. I love creators. Anyone who's like creating stuff in whatever genre that they create. And we were in Soho, we had 4 floors, and Kass would like make sure I was away from everyone. So I wasn't like in everyone's business, but I would wander onto the engineer floor because I loved them. I still love them. I'm friends with a lot of these engineers today. I go see music with them. Like, these are my people, right? And we just be jamming, right? We just be talking. Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Like, imagine a world we take the Facebook API and merge it with Twitter. And then like a week later, someone has built it and he talks to our CTO. And then the CTO calls Kass saying, why did Mike authorize the building of some like bullshit piece of software that makes no sense when we have this huge roadmap and we have customers waiting for it? And I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't tell him to build it. We were just talking, right? I didn't understand as the leader that there's power in words. When I say something is cool, an engineer hears that as like, I got to build that for boss man, right? And so I had to become very aware of my impact, both of what I did and what I didn't do, when I didn't listen, right? When I wasn't present, when my mind was elsewhere, when I said I would do something, but because I'm ADD, I didn't write it down, I forget about it, and we lose a client because of it, right? So these are like systems I had to put into place, and everyone has their strengths. And the reason why I talk about this is I'm not going to talk about my strengths, but I think I have a few strengths. I also, because of Kass and great partners in business, know my weaknesses. I encourage every leader to ask the people closest to you, where do I need work? What do I need to do to be better at supporting you? What do you need right now from me that I'm not giving you? If you could change one thing in how I interact with you and how I deliver for you, what would that be? And give people the permission to help you. Now, our ego takes it often as like, oh, I'm a bad person, right? But no, you're just doing stuff that maybe isn't optimal, but it's all fixable because we know how to pivot as entrepreneurs. right? And so I'm just a huge believer in self help because I was miserable at being CEO until I wasn't.
Yeah, interesting. And I think fully defining everyone's job for the business,
Big time.
especially the CEO, and everybody being clear on that. I'm working with a company right now installing their operating system, and I think we can grow the value of it tenfold over the next 3 years. Super excited. But you've got a CEO and his wife, wicked smart, but not part of the company, but still comes in and goes to different functional leaders and teams and talks about things, and has had no idea how it was disrupting everything, because now we need to do something that she talked about as being cool,
Right.
but it has nothing to do with, hey, let's do the basics really well before we move on to something else. So I think this is kind of across the board and how that can happen. So we have to be really clear. And I think defining the role and communicating that.
And you have to define, like, one of the biggest struggles I see both with myself and, we've worked with 100 entrepreneurs, right? I'm on, I think, like 20 boards right now, is you basically have to understand how you are interacting with your key people. And the stories we tell ourselves in our head and what is actually happening in reality are so huge. And it's not that you don't want to, we're not trying to disrupt. We just don't know because people don't tell us the truth as the leader, right? Like, they're deferential by, it's just what you do. Whoever gives you your paycheck, I guess you don't bite the hand that feeds you. I don't know if you know the psychology of it. You have to actively eat it out of people because they don't want to tell you your weaknesses.
Yeah, what I experience is the leaders, and I've done this a lot too. Well, why aren't people just this way? This is how they should be, but they don't, because of that power dynamic that's just going to be there, and we have to fully understand it. Cass, what was your point?
I was going to say, and I think, like, from my perspective, being an operator, my job was to literally look at our C-level team and understand strengths and weaknesses while also optimizing the value of our company, but figuring out processes so that things like Mike being the CEO and having quote unquote power over what he says and having that be a big impact. How can I now fix that in the company? And, I would come up with things not just like, hey, Mike, don't walk up to the engineering floor, which I basically told him. But the other part was the roadmap is only going to change in the leadership meeting, period. So I will tell every single person in this company, I don't care if there's 500 employees, the only thing you're doing is what's on that roadmap and what your manager said. And you will always know about a change, but it will come because we've done it together with the success team, the sales team, the technology team, the product team, the lawyers, the marketing, the PR. Everyone's in the room. We might not all agree with the change, but we were there in the room. So we keep our heads down and we can continue the focus.
Yeah, I think that's great. I remember a long time ago, I even got to a place where rumor mills were kind of running. Somebody would be in a meeting as a leader and they wouldn't agree, but then they would tell everybody else. And I just set rules. Everything, like, same thing, has to be agreed to in the room. If you disagree, you have to speak up. If not, you actually won't work here, going forward, because that's how disruptive it can be. One of the challenges, and I love the term that you used, for me, when I work with CEOs, early stage startup, give me the reality of what's going on. Get out of sales mode. And so, what did you call it? Don't polish the turd. Who would like to share that?
Don't
story?
shine the turd. Yeah, that was really disturbing. We had just basically lost golf.com. So we had it. We basically sold it to chipshot.com. Then we had the crash in 2000, and Chipshot lost their backing by Sequoia. So they were no longer going public and they went bankrupt literally 3 months after they bought us. So we had no control over anything. We spent about a month, maybe a little bit longer, on the road, buying it back out of bankruptcy and raising money again. And now we had two, new board members, and these guys were like hedge fund sharks. And so, this is the .com era. This was post the burst, and we're kind of like getting our bearings. And we have a board meeting, and Mike and our other co-founder, Mike Castor's there. And, how's everything going? And I'm like, it's good. It's good. We're doing well. Why don't you give us a sales update? And I said, okay, it's pretty good. And then hand it over to Mike. And Mike's like, yeah, we've done this. I'm not getting as many logos as we want. I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. And then the guy slammed his hand. I could hear it because it was speakerphone. It was like, don't shine the turd. I want the good, the bad, and the ugly 100% of the time. I don't care about bad news. I care about surprises. And it was such a beautiful lesson, really, that I think we've taken with us 100% in everything that we do. Bad news is okay. Surprises aren't.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, just reality. We can't react properly in a really smart way if we don't know exactly what's going on. I get to, it sounds like both of you do this as well. I get to occasionally speak at startup conferences and all that. And I find that most of the people in the room are more in the camp of playing startup than really passionate about creating value in the world. And I think that's why 90% of startups fail. What are your thoughts around why so many startups fail?
I mean, for us, it's, there are basically 6 things we look for when we greenlight an idea or greenlight an investment. And these aren't like mind-blowing things, right? The product, why is it different? How are you going to get it to market? We really look at market size. We look at unit economics of the financials. After we invested in Liquid Death, which is a water company, a beverage company, we very much started looking at the operations because we didn't understand how difficult it was to get water from Austria into a can into American grocery stores. And so, at the end of the day, businesses fail for, we found 2 or 3 specific reasons. And it's typically not external, it's typically internal. It is founders fight, and they're not spending time focused on customer problems, but they're focused around the kitchen table arguing about roles, responsibilities, product direction. They haven't had those, what's interesting is like, you go out on a date, you may have a great time. You then go on a second date. If you still like it, you'll go on a third date. You'll build the relationship. 3 years later, you'll get married. In the startup world, you have an idea, you get excited, you sleep with each other that night, and all of a sudden you get married the next day, right? You haven't lived together. You haven't talked about your vision for how hard you want to work. Do you want a big company, a small company, a lifestyle company, cash flow, or do you want to build it for 10 years and be billionaires, right? All of that comes out when you go to customers and the customers are like, no, thanks. I'm good. I don't need that, right? Like, you have a spreadsheet with your financials and then the world hits you in the face. And so founder issue is number 1. Number 2 is things take twice as long and twice as much money to do. So we always, when we look at financials, we cut the budget, we cut the revenue in half. Most founders know to spend money. So I believe their expenses, like they know how to spend the money, but take the revenue down by half and extend the time to build by 2x. And that's probably a more realistic financial model. And I'm not saying it's always, but from an investor looking at a spreadsheet from a very optimistic entrepreneur, which most of us are, it's just a nice way to look at it. And the second reason why companies go out of business is they run out of money. They don't have the runway. Whether you're a restaurant, they can't market and get people in, or a chip company that can't get through prefab. You just don't have the resources.
Yeah. I find that a lot of early stage, startups, they're successful at raising money and they're terrible with how they spend it. And I think some of the things that helped me as I grew my businesses from real, because I didn't come from money, a super low income family and lots of unhealthy and even toxic, dangerous drama within the family. So starting from scratch, the only way I could fund the things I wanted to do was to go out and sell something and use that money to fund it. And I just kept building and being super responsible around how I made that formulaic. But having a lot of money leads majority of the time that I've seen to really poor decisions, and not having money makes you so much smarter. I felt the financials I thought were just part of my bloodstream, my vascular system. I could feel every penny as it moved around. How do you navigate that? Companies, founders successful raising a bunch of money, that they spend it wisely, because you've invested, I think you said $400 million across all your portfolio. How are you ensuring they're being wise with the money?
So I'll take that because I usually specialize in the fundraising stuff. Companies that raise money, it's the exception, not the rule. Most companies set up a shingle, they get customers, they use that revenue to grow the business. We had a great dinner with 9 of our community members and Gary Vaynerchuk last night. And he was telling some of the early stories of he didn't have money. He didn't have money for an office. So he came to us and asked for a conference room before VaynerMedia, before VaynerX, before VFriends, before Empathy Wines, before, right? He worked for his dad till he was 34, never made more than 100,000. And what did he do? He focused on customers and then making them successful. That led to more customers. And now they have, $500 million of revenue and over 3,000 employees and massive EBITDA and, cash flow. And so there were only 24,000 companies last year that raised venture capital funding. Most companies get a loan from a friend or family member, a local bank, to basically just get up and running to generate revenue, right? The gap between when they start and when they generate revenue is months, not years. Start a restaurant, start a pizza place, start a hair salon. You're talking about a 3 to 6 month investment period and then revenue. Where companies get into issues, and we have some of these in our portfolio, they're looking for perfection. They're not launching and then seeing what customers say and then pivoting based on what's happening. They, are spending money on things that don't matter. If I were to spend money for a company today without knowing what it is, it's just like shell company. Where should I spend the money? Demand generation. Nothing else matters. If you have demand, you have a business. It doesn't matter if you have baby Jesus product in your mind, no one's using it and there's no demand, it sucks, right? And we're in a world where it's easier than ever to create demand. It started with Google, right? Search. And then it has evolved to, you could reach the global population on 3 platforms, right? Facebook and Meta, all their platforms, Google and TikTok. And so start there. Like line up 5 customers before you leave your job. If you're an accountant, don't leave PwC and your $400,000 until you have replaced that with charter customers. And those are real entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs that you're talking about, and I know a lot of them. We went to MIT. We're going to raise $10 million. We didn't spend the money. We're generating no revenue. You're not in business. You're in the capital incineration exercise.
100%. I've watched collectively hundreds of millions of dollars get incinerated the way you're talking about. As we start wrapping up here, we don't have a lot of time left. When I sold my aerospace company, it was important to me. That was my 9-figure biggest exit so far. In about 2 weeks, it'll be officially 10 years. It was important to me that anybody who wanted a job would have a job. They would keep the brand going, Able Aerospace. and it would grow, and it would be amazing. And when big companies buy small companies, medium-sized companies, they typically blow them up a high percentage of the time. Well, here we are 10 years later, and it's grown, yeah, amazing reputation out there. Textron Aviation bought them. They've done such a good job. Have you been following how has Buddy Media evolved since you sold the company? It's been really important to me that my side went well.
I mean, I can talk about the employee side. You know, we had about 350 employees. We were asked, like, who are the key employees, right? So there was a bunch that were immediately, launched into managerial and director positions, which was awesome to see because, Salesforce was such an established company. And I think that was really awesome. We still have employees there today. So we were bought in 2012. Our chief technology officer is now, 2 away or 1 away from Mark. Mike, is that right? Patrick Stokes?
Yeah, he's an executive vice president, runs most of product at Salesforce.
Which is kind of like unreal, right? Because this was literally a kid who had just graduated college and was, in his early 20s that came to us. Mike, why don't you talk about the rest?
Yeah, so I've thought about this a lot, and I know that I haven't talked to Mark, but if you ask him, is the Buddy Media deal for close to $1 billion worth it? The answer is no. And the reason why I say that is we were building on top of other platforms, Facebook being the biggest, but it was also Twitter, now X, and YouTube and Instagram. And what's happened since that time is the platforms have went from, we want you to build on our platforms, to, if it makes money, thank you, we will do it. We will copy it. We don't need you. And so the Buddy Media deal was a huge splash that got them in the consumer marketing space. We brought 9 out of the top 10 global marketers. They were able to sell a lot of products to companies like Unilever, which was an 8-figure product or client when I left. Sure, it's much bigger now. I don't know for sure. And I think Mark would say it didn't make sense from a financial perspective, but it helped propel our business forward and is exactly what we needed at the time when the social enterprise was taking off to be the leader that we are today. And so the great thing about Mark is when we started, he said, listen, I don't know how to keep you here. So I'm going to revest 30% of your stock, which was a lot of money. And I need entrepreneurial blood here. I need you and your people because I don't want this to be a corporate political place. I need it to be entrepreneurial. And I do that by getting entrepreneurs in here. If we cut open our arm, it's the same blood, right? He happened to create a $300 billion business and is much richer, but it's the same entrepreneurial energy, passion, purpose, right? And so a lot of these acquisitions don't work. You have to make sure if you do acquisitions that the people you are acquiring will be critical, even if your products don't meet the demand of the future, whatever that is. And in tech, that changes every 13 minutes, right? Like just think about it. Just forget our lifetime. Think about the last 2 years. Think about the last week. OpenAI is in the lead. Now it's Claude, Anthropic. Like these things are like you go from hero to goat in like 13 seconds. And so you want to be working with people who you don't care what's happening on the product and the customer side. You're in the trenches with great people.
That's amazing. One last question or topic I'd like to touch on, and I've heard you talk about this. So a lot of entrepreneurs with kids, they feel guilty. I'm not spending enough time with the kids. I'm sacrificing here, there. I feel like life is just one big blended life. I don't believe in this, divided time or separation. It's just one big blended life. Yeah. And I think there's so much power in modeling how to go through life. than telling. And with Gary Vee and that conversation you had, there are so many experts in the world that never do the thing, but tell everybody how it's supposed to be. And that just doesn't land well. If you model right, that will stick. And it could be a 5-minute interaction that sticks for a lifetime going through. So I think there's a lot there. What are your thoughts on that now that you've experienced all of this?
I think being parents and entrepreneurs, it's a lot. And I can't imagine, like you said, separating it out. We call it kind of like there's no work-life balance. There's only work-life integration. And we brought our kids along for the ride. And I think what I used to worry about with, not always being there, even though we were there for the big moments, I think what they gained was leading by example and us in our actions, seeing how we showed up for other people, how generous we were, our ability to give back to others relentlessly, tirelessly, and laughing along the way. I think they learned a lot from that, more so than perhaps I know it because, I say, like, what do you guys remember of us during these years? And even our oldest will say, I just remember going to your kickball games and having snacks with your coworkers in the pantry and in the lunchroom. And I loved all of your movie days and things like that. And then, our other kid would say, like, you were always working really hard. So I think it's definitely an incredible tool if you can stand the chaos of integration as opposed to separation, because I think, like you said, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, love it. Thank you so much. If our listeners want to learn more about your work, get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Definitely can reach out on any social media channel, which is Kass and Mike, and you're welcome to go to email at info@kassandmike.com.
Okay, awesome. Any final thoughts for our listeners? Mike, start with you.
No, I mean, the only thing that keeps going through my mind is, this concept of conflict, both in relationships and within your company. One of the things that is dawning on me is like how you moderate conflict, right? Between, say, the product and the sales team. Product saying, well, I can't build that. Even I know the customer wants it, but like we have a roadmap. Salesperson as well, like I need this to close the deal. By laying out the priorities and by communicating really clearly, you're able to be a consistent leader. And many of us make decisions based on who talks to us last, right? Because we hire A-type talent to come into our office and we're like, you're right. We should do that. Well, we haven't talked to the head of sales, right? And so slowing down, embracing conflict, understanding how you navigate through it, I think is both in business, spiritually, personally, is really important. And I think one of the reasons why we've been successful together is we fight really well. We get through conflict well.
I love that. I actually think positive emotional energy is the scarcest commodity on the planet. Supercharges everything we do. And it's the X factor for leaders, all of that. And that healthy ideological conflict or whatever it is such a big part of being, you have to do that well. Kass, what are some final thoughts that you have for our listeners?
I would love for founders, I think you started off this whole conversation talking about the importance of your team and people, that you don't do this alone. And so I would just continue to stress that giving to your employees, giving to your team is not only the right thing to do, but it will pay you back tenfold when it comes to all of the struggles and pivots you're going to have to make as a company, as an entrepreneur. And you shouldn't be afraid that you're giving away too much to employees. That is just an oxymoron statement. You've got to think about them because they will be your greatest asset and advocate.
Yeah, you could give up to half away and make way more money for yourself if that's what's important if you do this right.
Correct.
have to be the thing. It can't be a trick to try to game the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both for being here. This was fantastic. I didn't get to about 50 of my questions, but maybe we can do this again in the future.
Absolutely.
We'd love to. First of many.
Thank you so much. All right. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, please like and subscribe. Until next time, show your value to the world.